Welcome to the Art of the Game podcast. We are back for season 2. I'm Cass, and here for the ride are my co-hosts and co-founders, Reese and Ryan.
We started this podcast off the back of our business, Sport Design Australia, with the purpose of exploring the intersection of the sporting and creative industries. We wanted to bring you the biggest names in sports design and content excellence.
Our guests this season are providing us with perspectives from all across the world, giving us insight into the artistry behind content and how it influences every aspect of the game. Whether you are a sports enthusiast, a designer, or a creator, Art of the Game will have something for you. Hi guys, in today's episode, we are so excited to have Gaby Barns join us in studio. Gaby is one of Australia's leading content creators in the sports industry. She's previously worked at the Gold Coast Titans as their social and content lead before leaving to take on the wonderful world of freelance. We've got Gaby on the podcast today because she has a story that will no doubt resonate with many of you in the sports industry. Starting out as an intern at the Gold Coast Titans, she's never looked back. Before we get too far into the introduction though, it's best we let her tell you a bit about herself. So welcome to Art of the Game, Gaby. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome.
Thanks guys, appreciate it. It's good to be down here.
Thanks for coming all the way.
I know, all the way from the Gold
All the way
Coast.
from the
It's not that
GC.
far, it's only an hour flight.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, awesome. Do you just want to give us a quick overview as to your career so far? We'll obviously delve deeper into the parts that will resonate with the audience a bit later on. But if you could just give us a quick top line view of, I guess, Gaby.
A bit about me.
Yeah.
I guess my career really started back in 2013 when I did work experience with the Gold Coast Titans, which sounds crazy. I think I say a possum-eyed 15-year-old back then. I was honestly like
15, my goodness.
Yeah, you look
Wild.
at photos. My boss at the time, she made me take photos at my first game day and all throughout that week. And I look back on those photos, it's just hilarious.
I have
'cause
seen
can't
those
recognize
photos. Yeah, you look like such a baby. I can't believe you were 15.
That's nuts.
Who's forcing you to work at 15, by the way?
That was me wanting to do it. But no, yeah, so I actually had reached out because I had an interest in film and photography. I'd done it in high school and it was something that I was like, okay, this might be kind of where my career's going. And I reached out to Channel 9, Channel 7, all the broadcast avenues to do work experience. And it was a real tough no. And then lo and behold, lo and behold, I ended up with a week at the Gold Coast Titans with their community team. So not many people know that, but I actually started my journey back with the Gold Coast Titans community team. So yeah, I did a week with them and that turned into a school-based traineeship. This is crazy talking about like high school because it feels like so long ago. But yeah, I did 1 day a week with the Titans and their game days for a year and a half and then was offered a full-time role straight out of high school, which, I have so many people message me all the time saying, what degree did you do? What should I do? Should I do a course? Should I do something like to get to where you are? And I'm like, I really can't talk to that because I was so lucky that I kind of had the progression through my career that I did. And yeah, offered a full-time role in the community department that kind of evolved into, they realised my skill set as well and I was almost marketing the community team. Then I left for a couple of years and lived overseas, had a bit of a career break and came back and they did a bit of a restructure of the business. Ended up in the marketing team, which at the time was scary for me to go out of my comfort zone, but it was the best decision that ever happened. And I'm really glad that, that restructure happened to end up having me lead the, Titans social and content strategy alongside some really good people there. So yeah, after close to 10 years, I think it was 9 seasons in total, finished up in October and now I'm freelancing.
What a journey.
I know,
Yeah.
That's a bit of word vomit for you, but
No,
that's my journey so far.
Yeah, no, it's so great to see the progression that you've literally done. Like, started at the bottom, now you're here, for lack of a better phrase. I guess we came across you, obviously working in the NRL space. We didn't really get to work with the teams a whole lot until COVID happened. You're based in the Gold Coast and we were shut off from the world. Basically, Gold Coast was its own little town. No one was in, no one was out. So we had games up there. From an NRL point of view, we were able to call on you to help us from an NRL point of view. And I guess we just saw the skill set that you had on the field without having too much of a brief, without having too much direction. You kind of just went in and got it done. I think it plays into, I guess, your personality and the fact that you have a relationship with a lot of these players already because of the way you're ingrained with their lives in a club land. But before we get into the athlete side of things, I just wanted to touch on, you mentioned you didn't have a degree, or you don't really have a pathway in terms of education, and you're very self-taught. So it's pretty crazy in the creative space. But how are you self-taught, I guess, is kind of what I'm trying to ask. But I guess, how did you get to the point of, having a passion and then obviously adopting that into having a, really broad skill set now?
Yeah, I think for me, when I said, like, at the start in high school, I was always into film and photography. So I think I got my first camera. I think I still have it, honestly. It's like a vintage. It feels vintage.
What brand are we talking?
Oh, I'm a Canon girl, but it was actually a Nikon.
No.
I know. So I don't tell people. I don't tell people that often because I'm Canon through and through now. But yeah, I started really young and would always want to make like home videos, and I did travel with my friends, and I would always film. Or when I finished school, what really drove, I was traveling I'd make travel vlogs, and I always had a camera in my hand, and it was something I was just always so passionate about. And then I think with, my age as well, I've grown up on social media. So part of that being self-taught in the industry was I had the exposure to being in the high performance environment. I was able to learn off people as I kind of grew, and, without those foundational blocks of being in that industry already, it's just really accelerated to kind of where I could be self-taught. And yeah, I think really my photography, videography element, that really escalated in maybe like 3 years ago. Did a course, really stripped back the basics, and I was vulnerable. I wanted to go back to basics and try and learn from the start.
So you've complemented obviously your self-taught nature with some professional or educational things along the way, which is great. I think a good balance of having just like you've got digital native in you, you're just like inherently on social and you know how to use these kind of technologies. But I think the fact that you've complemented it with professional learning as well is definitely what's important for creatives out there.
Yeah. And how did you was there a point in time where you're like, I really need to brush up on something, or was it conversations that you had with people? How did you get to that point where you're like, I need to do this course?
Well, I think for me, videography was kind of my main asset, I guess I would say, while I was younger. And then I really found a passion for photography, but I didn't quite have the kit or the ability there. I knew the foundations, but then we worked at the Titans with a really great photographer. His name's Greg Sullivan. He worked for Canon for many, many years, and we were lucky enough that he did kind of an internal course with us. There was 3 of us, Kerry, Callum and I, at the Titans, and we stripped everything back. And it was kind of at that point where I was like, photography is something that I'm really passionate about, and now that's kind of my focus in, I guess, my creative freelance role. And it got to that point and I just went, you know what, let's be vulnerable, let's, strip everything back and go back to basics. And it just definitely helped to where I am now.
Kind of explains why the content changed a little bit in the last 3 or 4 years of the Titans. They've got some backing behind them. But tell us a bit more about the last 3 or 4 years working at the Titans. I know you've been out of there for almost not even a year, but a little bit now. But what was your main responsibilities in your role, and I know you said you crafted that role a little bit just by being, naturally good at what you were doing.
Yeah.
The role that you obviously were doing is something that's kind of irreplaceable. You were doing, 4 or 5 different people's role just for the nature of being there for so long, and that's what happens when you've been in a job for a while. But what did a general week look like for you?
That's a tough one because it changes so much, but basically it was about a 4-year period in between that restructure, me returning from overseas, and to where I left. So I kind of had different roles of different seniority levels within the marketing team to end up as the social and content lead. So for kind of that last role, the most senior one that I had there, I managed the overall social strategy, the workflows of the creative coming in from just a content perspective. So we had a design lead, and she kind of dealt with all the brand, all the creative graphic designs and whatnot. So from a content perspective, video, photo, I kind of managed that workflow alongside the commercial team. So we know how much the commercial team really leverage off our social media platforms and content nowadays. So managing that, the daily content, what's going out, when it's going out, and then also the capture element as well. So I think for a lot of social leads and social managers, you're not someone that captures that content either.
Yeah.
So I was also really lucky that I did have that photo video background, and I got to travel Australia and New Zealand with the team and cover their games and all their highlights. So a real storytelling piece is something that I look back on and I'm really fond of that kind of part of the role.
How did you find that balance of like being on the tools but also trying to get your head out of the weeds and think strategically? Like how'd you have enough time? How did you go about compartmentalizing those things?
Yeah, I think time is a big factor. Time is a big factor in that industry, but being back out on the field was kind of my release from being so embedded in that strategy side.
Yep.
I ended up working with the commercial team quite closely and actually some of the sponsors on conceptualizing some of their campaigns. So it was a really, big push for me and something so different that, I loved that kind of side of things, and it just really challenged me into something different. But yeah, I think time is very difficult.
Yeah.
It's a hard one to say, but yeah, it was a balance. I think I probably didn't have the time on the tools that I would love, but that comes with the nature of the role too. So having the time now as a freelancer, I can give that, the photo that extra little touch that I want, or that video the extra hour, because when you are working in that clubland and team environment, everything is so fast paced and deadlines are, they can be within the hour to turn stuff around, a training gallery, a hype reel, like there's always never enough time in sports.
I think you did a really great job though of changing the strategy of what a football club should be doing in terms of content and output and just the delivery of content across different platforms. I mean, it could be the nature of the fact that it was, COVID and there was more time and you were spending more time with these athletes and things, but I definitely feel like from being in the industry, in the sport for 10 years or so, there was a significant shift when you were starting to lead that kind of stuff, particularly in I guess exposure to athletes and getting them to do things that we just thought weren't possible with NRL players. So I guess talk to us about how you took on what traditionally would have been like a football content strategy and flipped it on its head a little bit and said, this is what content people want to see. I need to get the athletes on board. I need to work with them. I need to take them on a journey here. I need to stop just pushing out, game day posts, full-time posts, and focusing on what's happening on the field and actually look at what's happening off the field in order to make that, a well-rounded circle.
Yeah, I think for me, I had a really great boss at the time, and he kind of allowed me the leverage to push those boundaries a little bit, and I had a really good relationship with the football side, so the coaching staff were quite familiar with me, and having that relationship allows you the access to those areas. Not very often you see young females in and around a big group of footballers, but the trust was there, and kind of having that relationship with everyone on that side really allowed me to have that internal access. And once we really got our TikTok strategy open, that was kind of when we noticed a big change. We were pushing boundaries. There were some videos that we had to be like, Gabby, pull that one down. I was like, okay, it's a little bit too far.
We've all had that.
You've got to push the boundary. You need those phone calls.
But yeah, that was kind of the moment for me. I think I was at a Channel 9 shoot and I ended up having players jump on this Beyonce trend, which was, beyond anything for me, and to have that faith, or have the boys have that faith in me to do this type of content.
They literally just stripped back all their walls and were being so vulnerable. I think that just plays into the fact that you're obviously creating content that's natural to the environment that they're growing up in. They're already going home, creating TikToks, having fun, being, people off the field. So I think you guys were just able to like enhance that, grasp that, and just make it really relevant for your brand. I think we can all attest to the fact that you guys did an amazing job with that from an athlete point of view. Do you think it was because you were bringing content that the athletes were familiar with into the football landscape, or do you think it was because you created such a great relationship with them throughout the period of time working with them? There was so much trust there that they were just willing to kind of, do whatever you told them to do and they just trusted you? Or do you think it was because they really wanted to be, doing TikTok, or a hybrid of both?
I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
when when the players would see me storm down to training, I say storm down, when I'd walk down to training, they going, oh my God, what's she going to ask us? Like, I'd come up to them and they'd be like, what do you want now?
Yeah.
But
you're like, what mood are you in today?
literally, do you want to make a TikTok? Do you want to do a little bit of a dance?
Yeah.
No, I kind of knew which players I could lean on for certain types of content. You know, you've got those players that are super engaged and they're making content on their own channels, and you've got some players that are just not interested whatsoever, but then you've also got to balance that with the profile and, you know, what the, you know, consumer wants to see on your channels. So it was a bit of a balance of that. And I think for me, like, I was always around, I was familiar, I'd been there for so long, I'd created these relationships with players, you know, someone like AJ Brimson, Phil Sami, Brian Kelly, Mo, they were in the under 20 squad when I was, you know, an 18-year-old as well. So I've literally grown up with them, alongside them. And someone like Jim Lenahan, the Titans assistant coach at the time, I grew up with like his children, you know, family friends. So all of that relationships is so pivotal to, you know, everything. And I think I go back to, you know, early days, I used to babysit some of the players' kids. I don't think many people know that, but, you know, that was kind of, for me, I look back on all of that and I go, that's the most key part to how that was successful, how I could make sure that the content was going to be well received by the players and by our audience. You know, even to the point where I traveled to France and I actually stayed with Greg and Becky Bird in France. Like, you would never expect that as a little, you know, I think I was 19 maybe at the time, an employee of the Titans, but I had formed that relationship with that player and their player partner. And
it's definitely a little family there, wasn't it?
It was. So that was the hardest part for me, leaving my little Titans family. But yeah, there was plenty of people over the years that kind of led that to where it is.
Yeah.
And you talk about like, everyone we kind of talk to, relationships are so important, whether you're new to the industry, whether you've been in there for 20 years. One relationship that I'm really keen to pick your brain on is the relationship with the commercial team. So many sporting teams, brands that we speak to, that relationship doesn't exist, or there's a lot of friction there. You even mentioned that you work with sponsors on like concepting some ideas. Can you talk us through how that kind of evolved and where you kind of left it when you finished up?
Yeah, I think it's obviously, as I said before, the whole commercial space, they really need social media and content, because if you're a sponsor, that's what you see. Like, you see the Gold Coast Titans, you don't have that everyday integration where you're seeing them at training, seeing all this different stuff. So that for them is like such a big touch point, and now like it's just the way of the world. So yeah, the last probably 2 years, I'd say it really evolved heavily, and a lot of the sponsors were really leaning in, and they were actually coming to the commercial team, to my understanding, and, you know, really wanting to engage heavily on social. So we had a big commercial team at the Titans, which is great. We had plenty of sponsors to create content for, but we would do like fortnightly whips with the whole team, and we'd go around, because there is such a massive workload there for what we had is a small team compared to what many other clubs and sports work with. So yeah, we'd have a fortnightly whip where we just go around the room and it'd be like, what does Forex need? What does MyPay Now need? What have we got coming up? What shoots have we got coming up? When do you need, you know, the photographer here, the videographer there? So we just really kept communication quite open, and yeah, was challenged a little bit, as I said, with some of the sponsor strategies, and I had a really good relationship with the likes of, you know, MyPay Now, and they were our principal partner at the time, and we really worked closely with them. They loved the kind of short form social strategy. They weren't, you know, about the numbers or anything. They just wanted their brand out there
Presence,
with what was going to go well. So bringing my kind of expertise to that, and sit down with their marketing manager at the time to kind of go, well, this is what I think will work. And they were basically like, yep, integrate this, go for it. So
I love that.
I had a really good relationship with a lot of the sponsors that I personally dealt with. And then, yeah.
How many of those sponsors were doing kind of the logo slap kind of executions on social because of they're just maybe not resourced or have the time and effort to kind of go down the custom built kind of sponsorship platform? So how much were you doing just like, you know, properties that you already had in your landscape and you commercialize them, versus the ones that you're talking about kind of digging deep into what their objectives are, what their social strategy is, and developing something bespoke for them? that's the first part of the question. And then next, how did the difference of the performance in that and those content and the relationships with the people that were doing either or?
I think it was something for the Titans that they were so big on evolving that. I think when I kind of had started in that marketing space, social space, we inherited a lot of contracts, and I'm sure as many other clubs do. So there was kind of things in place, and it was about changing the narrative and understanding one of the commercial team, and to understand why, you know, we're not going to put a 5-second intro card on a 60-second piece. So it was about kind of educating, I would say, our commercial team, so then they have the foundations to go and educate their sponsors. Because if you have a commercial team that doesn't understand why, and they're just saying, we're going to take a logo off you and people are going to have this tiny little logo here, that's when you get a bit of backfire. But for us, we really worked in hard on our digital best practices. We had a big document that we kind of sent out, that our commercial team would send out to the sponsors to have them understand why, you know, certain things don't work. And then, I think we just had a really good balance of understanding, and by the end of it, we were in a pretty good position where we could have the results to prove why, you know, why this way works better. So, I think it's still something that will always be a pain point for a lot of people. Education is just the biggest thing I'd say for anyone that, you know, needs to try to get their point across, is just get the understanding as to why.
Yeah, why. I think, I think that focus on education is, it feels really simple, right? But it's in practice, you're breaking down a lot of years of intrinsic behaviour and
legacy.
Yeah, a lot of legacy. So, like, to be able to do that, I think is an incredible result. And can you talk through us, like, some of the differences you did see in the performance of the content, like content that was a little bit more old school versus the format that you took in kind of engaging your sponsors and having them on board? What things were different in terms of what you were measuring?
I'd say we kind of had case examples where it's hard because you don't want to use a sponsor that, you know, you've currently got, or you don't want to tear anyone down either when you're going, well, this is what we shouldn't do. So it's kind of a balancing act there, a little bit of that. But, you know, we had one project which was a really heavily big production piece. It was a 3-part series, and we had players spend 6 hours each out at a shoot, and it was our lowest performing piece that I'd ever seen. All 3 of them were like our top 3 lowest pieces.
Ouch.
And that was, we luckily, internally, we didn't edit it. It was an external edit. But that was like the kind of pin drop for me. It was like, you know, there needs to be a shift in this. And then you look at, you know, we did a 6-part My Pay Now content piece, and they had that flexibility, and they were like, we just want our brand out there. What's going to go well? And the numbers on that compared to the numbers on something that we would advise is not, you know, the way to go.
The balance between like monetizing content and being authentic, right? Like it's just, there's just so much. It sounds so simple, but as you're saying, like you could spend hours on something and it perform really poorly, and then you're like, oh God, you know, what did I do wrong? Or, you know, you could really be self-reflective on that. But it's great that you use that as a learning experience to craft new properties for new sponsors or up and coming content franchises, to not make the same mistake twice. But I guess you're right. You don't want to kind of be like, this performed so badly, we'll never redo it again. But at the same time, we definitely know that authenticity is selling. Just quickly before we move on from commercialization, I guess a lot of the clubs or teams will be having issues in terms of inherently as digital natives, or as, you know, the generations that we're at, we know that content, great content, quality content sells, right? We know that it does a job of either engaging an audience, building brand trust or affinity, those kinds of things. Some of those things are not measurable by an engagement metric or an impression metric or a revenue number. So that's a really hard sell to make to people who are at, like, you know, your CFO, CEO levels, potentially, who have been around for a long period of time, who focus more on traditional sponsorships and partnerships rather than just, you know, the social team that want to go off and create cool content and do TikToks. So I think the shift in strategy between clubs that we speak to, you know, you guys, the Eels, South as well, you know, the clubs that are really paving the way in rugby league particularly, have been able to bring their leadership team on that journey and really get them to invest in the invest in investing in content. That doesn't make any sense, but like, make that investment into content and be really comfortable about it without having to see a specific number on the weekly report. Educating the commercial team is one thing. How did you kind of balance that in terms of getting it up to a CEO, CFO level and ensuring that they were on board with what you were doing from a content point of view?
Yeah, that was probably more of a Dean question, who was my general manager and the general manager of our team at the time. He was really great at reporting up and having the buy-in, and I think our executive level as well was really understanding of why. And I think, our growth for the Gold Coast Titans, we did not have a lot of success on the field in my tenure there. I think we made finals twice in 9 seasons for me, and we were finishing bottom of the ladder for a lot of time. So we had evident growth across our channels, and in the end, that for our exec level to understand that, we were on par with, Penrith, the Broncos. Yeah. We were on par with the Storm, and they were top 4 teams for a lot of those years. So that in itself, yes, it's kind of a metric that you can measure to a point, but for us to see that, our fan base was growing, yet we were at the bottom of the ladder, that in itself was enough to just say, okay, well, what you're doing is working.
There was proof in the pudding, I guess. Yeah. That's great.
I think it's a testament to the strategy of, again, too often we see clubs or sporting teams move away from those moments where maybe they aren't performing on field and not really have a strategy for that. But you've obviously clearly done that, and you've seen success with it. Is there like one piece of content or like one thing that really stands out to you in your time at the Titans?
Like one piece that I'm really proud of, or like
just the most memorable or memorable moment.
You put me on the spot here.
That's what we like to do.
We also saw a piece that you didn't get to be completely a part of that's come out recently as well, that you were a bit thing. So I think that even things like that you were so attached to content that you didn't get to finish, but you're obviously on the journey for to see how invested you were, and that was really great. But obviously there's others that you would have done as well.
That one that you're talking about. Yes, Bo Fermor did his ACL the start of last year. It was a few days before round 1, and it was like the most devastating thing for our little team. Bo trained really hard in the preseason, was on track to have one of his best years yet. He was on the brink of making the Origin team and everything. And I was lucky enough that Bo trusted me and was happy for me to basically be in the theatre before he walked in. Like, he had his anaesthetic and everything, and I was sat in the theatre with him to capture, and he actually came to me. Like, we had kind of spoken about it, and he said, no, I want to capture this, I want it documented. So for me, from March last year, that was kind of my little project, and I didn't get to do a whole lot of those bigger pieces because I just didn't have the capacity, but that was one I kind of took with both hands. And yeah, it was really sad that when I left, I said to Bo, I was like, this is really hard that I don't get to actually finish that. But I was at the game round 1, and it was really cool to see him run out and know that he was back there. But I guess from maybe other projects, I started, managing the last couple of content shoots, so like our big content shoots for the year. For me, that was a project that I'd love to see come to full fruition. We'd have social kind of stations, and you have the full photography stations, but to plan that all and have players come through, and a lot of those days are very chaotic, but for it to go seamlessly was always something that I was really stoked about. And back to probably not my best creative job when I look back at the actual production piece, but one that I was really proud to follow was Jaden Campbell's debut back in 2021 maybe. Having been at the club for so long, I knew JC as a very little boy when Preston Campbell was playing. So to see him make his debut up at the Sunshine Coast against the Storm with his dad in the crowd was a pretty cool piece to say that I was part of that moment.
Very cool.
Yeah,
I think it's
so
the beauty of sport, right? So many great stories.
For sure. Let's just jump quickly into like working particularly in sport. So obviously your experience working in sport began at the Titans, so most of your reference points will be from there. But I guess we wanted to just chat about the impact of resource limitations on your ability to produce quality content. So how did you navigate in your role the constraints of headcount versus budget. I mean, we've spoken about it before, how you kind of fit it all into your day and be on the tools versus off the tools. But talk to us a little bit about how you were trying to do that.
Resourcing is something in the industry, especially in Australia, that we're just probably not at that level as of American sports and the like. There are some teams in Australia that are phenomenal and they are growing, and it's really cool to see. You look at the American side of things, and even some sports here where they do have someone that's just for TikTok, someone that's just short form reels, TikToks, someone dedicated to the long form videography, one that just does social strategy. So
it's crazy.
It is crazy, because I look at that and go, oh my gosh, I was doing all of that alongside a great team.
Welcome to my burnout.
Yeah, but no, there was one thing, I guess, where social is always online. It's always evolving. It would be the first thing I did in the morning. I'd make sure that everything was okay and the post had gone up and there was no breaking news. But one that actually springs to mind is David Fifita re-signed with the club. It was a massive talking point in the media for so long, and I got a phone call at like 8 p.m. on a random Tuesday night, or maybe it was Monday night, and it was from Dave, and he goes, "Gab, I've re-signed." And I'm going,
you're like,
hang on,
when?
I'm like on the couch with my partner watching TV in my pajamas, and he's, I've re-signed, can you like make this really cool like hype video? And I said, oh, okay, like no worries.
What, right now?
Yeah, like when he said, no, we're announcing it like ASAP.
Oh my
and I said, oh, hang on, reel that back in, let me just strip that back. And then I had like our recruitment manager calling me, and then we were on like a group chat with our, media manager and Dean and our marketing manager. Like we were all just trying to conceptualize what the heck do we do, because we knew that it was maybe coming, but with a lot of these re-signings, you don't really know when or if. You kind of just get the tick and it's go, go, go. So we didn't really have anything prepared, and we actually had to just go with a photo of him saying Dave's re-signed, because he wanted to post himself first, and it was like
such a shame,
such a big
such
thing.
a great moment to like capitalize on.
So that's one thing. I just tried to start to set boundaries in that last year, where I was like, I am picking up my phone, I'm checking my emails nonstop, and social, as you said, is always live, so anything can happen at any given point. And in this social landscape, we are working round the clock 24/7.
It's almost like a badge of honour that we wear though for a period of our career, where we're working so hard, we're in sport, it's so great, we're combining our passion and we're combining our talent, and you just think that it's the best thing ever. I mean, I definitely did as well. I was like, yes, it's great that I'm leaving the office at 9 p.m. at night. I feel like a superwoman, like I can do it all. But, have kids now, and I got no time for working till 9 p.m. I mean, I start my job at 9 p.m. That's correct. Bit of a shift there, but I guess it's a good point to touch on. There are a lot of young creatives that think that slogging it out and working 16-hour days is what's going to get them success and what's going to get them the break. And I mean, there is an element of that. People obviously have this entitlement at this age where you kind of get whatever you think you deserve, but there is an element of hard work, and we've all kind of been there. But, how are you, in those last few years or last 12 months, how did you try and manage the expectation of being constantly required and constantly needed and constantly wanting to fulfill, your own pride and passion in your projects versus your own mental health, well-being? I mean, you have a relationship as well. So how did you try and balance that? Or potentially, if you didn't do a good job of it, do you think that's the reason why you've gone into the freelance space, to be able to counteract some of those mental health issues?
Yeah, I think for me, like that was one of the key factors or deciding factors in why I needed to take a step back. And it's at no discredit to anything or anyone or any business, but it was just a matter of me needing to put myself first. And I think, as you said, like for us as creatives, I thrive off that. So like I was almost my own worst enemy at times, because maybe I didn't have to go to that captain's run on a Saturday morning, but I wanted to for the sake of my channel and having, well, I say my channel, our channal. It felt like my little baby. It was like my baby, honestly. I don't have kids, but it was like my baby at the time. And I wanted to do that, and I wanted to be there in those moments. And it was like I was kind of shooting myself in the foot a little bit, but I was just so passionate about making sure that, we always had the freshest content. We had, up there with the best content in the league. And I'd like to think that I gave it my all to be up there with the best, and I think the growth kind of attributed to where those feelings were coming from. And you get a bit greedy in a sense. You see that growth and you see the possibilities that are there, and you kind of just wanted to keep going. So it got to a point last year where I just went, this isn't feasible. I can't get home, I'm not going to the gym, I'm not living this active lifestyle. I can't get home to cook my own meals because I'm so consumed by wanting success on these channels and wanting to be able to do everything. So yeah, it was eye-opening for me to just take a step back and put myself first. But now, yeah, with freelance, I've got that flexibility, which is great. And it's hard because I do have so many young kids that message me on social media and they say, you know, what's it like? You know, I'm really looking to get into this industry. And now my number one piece of advice to anyone, like even if you're in, you know, the corporate world in sports, any element or any job within sports, I just say set boundaries. Yeah. Like you don't need to be at work till 9 p.m. at night. Like of course there's going to be times like that. And I think that goes to show with your work ethic, right? Like if you've got that strong work ethic, you want to be there late, you want to be making sure that stuff gets done. But there's a balancing act. Like you can do that on occasion, but working 70-hour weeks is not feasible.
No, and it's either you're doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing or you're doing it inefficiently. I feel like, you know, being a time poor mum now, I find that I'm able to do, I don't know, I'm like, what did I used to do in these 8-hour blocks at work or 10-hour blocks? I'm like, obviously worked, but like, you know, you think about the amount of time that you would have spent going to the kitchen or lunches or chatting and things like that, and you can be a lot more efficient. I can be a lot more efficient now working in like 2-hour blocks throughout the day with a break in between, fitting in work-life balance and just being able to kind of put parameters and boundaries around that, and that obviously helps running your own business and being your own boss. Yeah. But let's move on to the freelance world. Obviously, you've given us a bit of an insight into why you decided to leave after 10 years. That must have been extremely hard for you to do. But talk to us about transitioning into the freelance world. What was the initial challenges that you faced when you had to move from, you know, your family, basically is how you've spoken about it, and your life growing up from 15 years old? It's more than a job to you, and you've left that and you're starting a freelance career. So talk to us about the initial challenges that you faced.
Yeah, it was a massive decision. Like, as you say, it was like my family there, and I had a really long process. I think it was like 8 weeks between like me actually handing in my resignation and it actually was kind of prolonged because, actually closing my laptop. But it was prolonged because I wanted to go all the way with our women's team. So our women's team were kind of the key factor into why I was there for, you know, 8 weeks. And I did really want to give the club the opportunity to find someone and for me to help, because like I was so passionate and I care so much about those platforms that I really wanted to make sure that it was, as well as whatever handover I could do was, given to the next person. And yeah, it was a really, really tough one. I remember my last men's game because they were out, they didn't make finals. So we had a home game at the end and I got given flowers and I was in the middle of, you know, before they did the team song. I think they won that game, I think.
Bit of a blur.
I hope so. But yeah, they were like speech, 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 and got me to go up there, and I gave them a bit of stick and nervous as all heck in front of every executive and so many people in the room for the last game. And I said, you know, it's a shame that you guys couldn't win a premiership. And like fully just toasted everyone on the spot. And like, there's a photo of the moment it happened.
Mic drop.
And I was like, I didn't mean it like that, but like it was a shame that I never got to see that with you guys after such a long period of time, because that's what you strive for, right? Like that's, you know, the end goal is you want to see the success of a team. And yeah, but for me in that moment, like I just was so heavily supported by this group of people that I have spent most of my, you know, I guess my adult life with. And I spend more time with them than my family and my partner at some stages through the years. So yeah, it was great. And then going out on my own it was a very scary leap, but I've been very lucky. Like a lot of the work has kind of fallen in my lap and generally off the connections and that I built over the last 10 or so years. So it's been a good transition. I've fully feel like I've got my work-life balance back on track. I've got the flexibility, and I think that's, you know, the perks of being a freelancer, right, is you can decline jobs, you can take jobs, you can pick and choose when you want to work. So yeah, 6-ish months I think now, and finding that balance, which is what it's all about.
That's great. And before we get into like some of the projects you've done over the last 6 months, I want to talk about some of the more boring things of like freelancing or running your own business. How have you managed the things like all the admin, all the doing your finances, paying your bills, getting invoices out? Like, how have you struck the balance between doing that stuff, which enables you to then go and do all this work?
I'm very lucky that my family and my partner are very business savvy people. So I'm like, what should I have on an invoice? What should I do there? It's pick up the phone type stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, the admin and bookkeeping side of things is definitely something you just don't really think about, right? I'm like, oh, I just want to get a camera and go and shoot something. But yeah, the comms, and it's all natural, I guess, like being in the environment where I'm consistently email comms, the like. But yeah, bookkeeping, accounting side, someone else can do that.
Seriously.
I can't keep up with it.
That's exactly how I feel.
I think you said before that, you know, a lot of the jobs that you're working on now have landed in your lap, and I definitely don't think you give yourself enough credit for the brand presence that you've got out in the world, and you've definitely stepped that up since leaving the Titans as well, and you're definitely becoming, you know, a personality within the content space and the social space aside of what you've done already. So I think you should be accommodated on that. I don't think that you give yourself enough credit.
Thank you.
But moving on from that, you know, some of these jobs are pretty incredible. You did spend, you know, as you said, a month with the Australian Open. You've done some work with Sale GP. You know, talk to us about how those things started to bubble away in the background and how you actually transitioned those into work and your general experience with people other than rugby league.
And that's been the biggest thing, right? Like all I've known is rugby league, and I've worked with, like, obviously did a bit with you when you were at the NRL. Like that was my first introduction to kind of doing some contracting work, and had worked with the Kiwi Ferns when I went to the World Cup. So I had like a little kind of dribs and drabs of what it was like to work with a different business, but I've never really worked like on that kind of scope with anyone else. So it was great because I have like my foundations that I know, but it's so nice to see like how other businesses run and how they work. And I think for me, that's been the coolest part of freelancing, like working with other NRL clubs, working with the Australian Open, seeing how these other sports work from, you know, their in-house perspective and their just inner workings is, so different. And I didn't really know what to expect, I guess. Like, it's just been something so different. And I think it's cool bringing my experience and then intertwining it. And it's almost like I can, not consultancy, but I can almost give like, oh, this is what worked for me. And you're kind of picking up bits and pieces from different sports.
And you almost get validation from them back to you as well, to be like, oh, the stuff that I was doing back there actually made sense. Like other people are also adopting these strategies and doing this kind of stuff. Do you want to give us a bit of a deeper dive into the Australian Open? It's obviously are pretty huge on the Australian sporting calendar, especially when it comes to, you know, content output, you know, their social presence, their commercial integrations. There's so much happening throughout that is it a month tournament or a 2-week tournament? 2-week tournament, but a month activation, I guess. Talk to us about what you were doing there, what role you were playing, the size of the team. Basically just, a bit of a 101 around Oz Open and what your experience was there.
Yeah, so I had a chat with Bree and Justin, who are two amazing people that work for Tennis Australia. Bree is, I'm going to butcher her role here, but I think she's head of operations and content potentially. And then Justin is a social media manager, and he's worked, I think it was his 10th AO, which was incredible. Wow. So I had a conversation with them back in October, I think, like it was quite early on, and had locked in to come down and spend the month down in Melbourne, which was awesome.
Do they bring their whole team in? Like, are you? So
they have, I think they have 5, or in the team that I directly worked in, they have 5 or 4 that actually work full time year round, and then they bring in, I would say we had close to 30 people total, which, incredible. Right? Wow. Like, I look at that as a creative doing, obviously on such a smaller scope at the Titans, but I'm like, I'm doing all of this. Mind-blowing. Like,
that is so
one
crazy.
Away game. So we had really lucky to have such a big group. And I think for me, like, I came down on the 4th of January, ended on like the 30th. So it was a 4-week period. They have a week of kind of just education and getting to know the systems, getting to know the people, getting to know the areas. They have a week of the like pre-qualifying kind of tournament, and then the full 2-week block. For someone that didn't know tennis, like at all, 2 weeks prior to this, my parents are going, what's a deuce? What's an ace? And I'm going, oh no, I am so screwed here. But now I can say I'm actually a tennis fan. Good. So, so I had that kind of chat in October, started with them in January. I was one of their like senior social producers that they brought in, and the role was super interesting, something like I'd never experienced before. I was really lucky that they trusted me with a lot of the courtside access. So, you know, I was in and around Rod Laver Arena under the tunnels and, you know, rubbing shoulders with the best of the best. And
you were like, who are you? Hey, can you just help me with it? He's like the, you know, number one tennis player in the world. You're like, oh, whatever.
I know, like I learnt their names very quick, might I add. But there was some times where like they would, you know, Bree Justin was showing me around where I need to be, and they're like, oh, that's, and I'm like, oh, who?
You're like, cool.
Like,
hey,
you know. But you know, for me, as someone in this industry, like it's so important to differentiate being a fan and being a professional.
100%.
So I've worked at, like, because I was exposed to these, you know, high-profile athletes working at the Titans at 15. It just became second nature for me.
Yeah.
So working with the likes of someone like Novak Djokovic is, it's like, whoa, that, you know, you are the kind of global athlete, you know, Stefanos Tsitsipas, all of these big athletes. But for me in that time, like, I'm not in that fan moment
You're a
whatsoever.
professional,
And it's so important to differentiate that, because you can imagine you're, you know, one of these global athletes and having someone that's, you know, in that position, fangirling. And it's about like engaging too. If you've got to go, Novak, I need you for a photo here. If you're nervous and, you know, you're fangirling in that moment, like it's just, so important to be able to differentiate that.
Shift your emotions. It's not to say don't be a fan. It's just like don't be a fan in those moments and be able to kind of, assert your professionalism over that.
Yeah.
I found that. What was your role? So you're saying you were you know, part of their senior content team.
Yeah.
Day to day, what are you doing? Because obviously the Australian Open runs all day. There's games everywhere across the whole thing. You've got a team of 30.
Yeah.
What the hell's happening? How the hell is this getting organised?
It was, honestly, something.
Is there a content strategy? Is there a content plan, like post this, or is it just like
I asked
windows?
the same question in that first initial meeting. I said, okay, so like, do you run off like an Asana board, a Monday board? Like, do you have your scheduled times? And they're like, oh no, we just post. And honestly, it was wild because they would post like up to, you know, 100 posts a day.
Yeah.
And there was nothing. It was just post. You could post within
Just
30
volume.
seconds of each other.
So
and
are
I'm
you like over here in one
panicking.
court, someone's in another court, and you just have free reign to post whatever you think is good content at that time?
Well, a lot of it's the broadcast stuff. So majority of that team is like sat up in the offices, and you know, they have people that are dedicated to Twitter, X. They have someone dedicated to Instagram.
I love how we can't
Reels.
just say X
I
and
can't.
people know what it is.
It's always going to be Twitter.
It always has to be like
When
Twitter
does
X
that
or
change,
X Twitter.
So yeah, they have people that are dedicated to kind of each platform. Like someone literally just doing Instagram stories, which for me is like, what do you mean you can have like a whole 12-hour shift with just doing Instagram
Oh my
stories?
gosh.
So yeah, there was basically that whole team kind of sitting up there, especially in that qualifying week in the early weeks of the first tournament, or the early days of the first tournament, sorry. There's so many games happening at, you know, any one given time. And their senior team would kind of pick out the key matches that they would want to promote across social. So all those key players or like key talking points. And then there was only a certain level of like broadcast, which I think is pretty common along like a lot of sports, that you could actually post. So like a big collaborative effort to kind of understand who's posting what and when, because the volume is just so high. And then for people like me, I was kind of more active out on the courts, or, you know, out around the grounds capturing colour and the like, which I guess is where my kind of specialty comes in that athlete relationship format, and then the ability to just kind of go out and get that fan engagement as well. So,
and were you posting that live based on your own, I guess, editorial sense, this is great content, or was that feeding back up into a central location to be like, oh, let's just post this piece, then we'll put that in, tag it, because obviously you want to be as real time as possible, but you don't want to interfere with, I guess, what a storyboard is, or you're saying it probably isn't a storyboard, but
They had a really good strategy. So they had a partnership with Google Pixel. So with that came Google Photos, and I know a lot of us are iPhone users, Apple users, we use AirDrop and the like, but Google Photos actually was pain points, but it worked really well in a sense, because you could upload and it'd go straight back to the team that were upstairs. So we kind of would just keep communication flowing, and it'd be like, okay, you know, Gabby's got that match winner, they've posted the scorecard, they've posted the, you know, they've made the finals or whatever that may be, and then it's like, bang, Gabby, go live with, you know, that raw vision to feed. But it was all just communication. So it would depend, because I might have got, you know, some colour where someone might create a reel out of that back upstairs, or, it was only those real time heavy ones where it's like, okay, I'll go live. And then, when you're capturing kind of that fan engagement stuff, if there's not a big match on, just posting that pretty live.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Google Pixel partnership? Because I think in terms of sports partnerships, it's probably one of the most intriguing and one that's pushed the boundaries the most. They're doing stuff, across the Premier League. And can you tell us like what the brief was to you, and what kind of flexibility you were given to kind of create the content using the Google Pixels?
Yeah, I obviously wasn't part of like forming that partnership. I just kind of came in second wind, but the Google Pixel was great. Like the quality of everything, because I think, for us that are just natured into Apple, a lot of, I don't know what the percentage would be now, but obviously a lot of us are using these Apple products to have something.
Not Ryan.
No,
Oh, really?
I'm a Pixel guy.
Are you actually?
Yeah.
Have you ever owned you have never owned an Apple iPhone?
The first iPhone 3, I think.
iPhone 3?
Yeah. I know, it
That
feels
probably
so
still
weird.
isn't like the size of your hand now. Like they're so small back then.
Yeah.
It's so annoying when you have like business partners and you want to like
Send
The
stuff.
green
like
text.
me and Reese are on Apples. You're like, who is this
I
loser?
stand firm.
Who is this
Wow,
loser on Google
I
Pixel?
love that for you.
Yeah.
But no, it was great. Like we found that it, obviously like teething issues and understanding when you've got 30 people trying to use a new phone pretty much. We had some education sessions beforehand to really get our head around, what it was going to look like. But it was great. It was really cool to see the access, I guess, that Tennis Australia got from having this partnership, and I think it worked really well. Like there was a photo that went around on LinkedIn, and it was one of my colleagues at the time that had come in contracting as well. There was all of the like big Getty photographers with their 400mm lenses, their 300mm lenses, and then there was Fraser with his iPhone, with his Pixel, and that really is like where we're at now. Is this live, reactive, engaging content is what people want to see, and that's what goes insane. Like there were moments where I think Yannick Sinner had won. I think he beat Novak to get into the grand final, and that moment went gangbusters on social media. Over any photo, over any scorecard, like this is what people want to see. So these partnerships like Google Pixel to provide a team with access like that is just so invaluable now.
What a partnership though.
So good.
Product in hand and the flow on effect of what the content is actually producing. Like it's just such a twofold. It's just it was an amazing execution. It's something that we'll probably talk about in terms of the changing landscape of commercialization of content for a long period of time, for sure. So, I mean, we could talk to you for hours about Oz Open. Our like tennis nerdiness is coming out in here, but you worked with other sports as well. You've got Sail GP. I can't even remember what else you're working on, but I know there's a lot. How are you going in terms of getting new clients, and where's your focus kind of been in terms of sales? I guess it's hard to say for an individual, but how are you getting yourself out there, and what are you hoping to kind of get?
I think still just using like my own platform, right? Like I found a lot of that is coming from my Instagram page, which sounds crazy, but it is like your own platform. And I think it's so important to have that personal brand. And at times it is when you're in clubland, it is so hard because you don't own that IP, right? Like, so there's a balancing act of, how much you can promote your personal branding, but in the end, that's all you're creating at the time. So yeah, I feel like having that platform has really allowed me to showcase everything that I'm doing and keeping up to date with, or having other people keep up to date with what I'm doing. Sail GP was a super random one. Didn't know anything about sailing either. Look at me, all I knew was rugby league, but now I'm working across all these different
exact
sports.
same. It's amazing to see there's a world of sport outside of rugby league, isn't it?
Yeah. Sailing, the Sail Grand Prix, they travel all around the world essentially. I think they're almost like 3-4 weeks apart between each race, and their office is based up in London. So one of the girls that works in their social media team reached out to me on Instagram. I think we were connected on LinkedIn prior to that, but she just said, hey, we're traveling down to Australia. We need someone. Are you free? Pretty much. I'll put you in contact. What's your email? Okay. And isn't that just crazy that social media, or like obviously me being active on those LinkedIn platforms, on Instagram and the like, led that connection to happen, and honestly had the best experience there, like to learn something so new. And I think it's only in its 3rd or 4th season as well. So yeah, that kind of having those platforms allowed me to just get work like that was kind of tenfold to just go, wow, put 2 and 2 together, you get that. And then, yeah, from a broader scope, I think just the connections I've got in the industry. Like I worked with Supercars last year, and that was just based off an old colleague that worked at the Titans like 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah, like connections I think is just the biggest thing as well.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more just around like creating your own brand on social, Instagram, LinkedIn? Like what's the number one thing that like young creatives can be doing, or creatives that are working in clubs or leagues at the moment? What can they be doing to kind of build their own personal brand?
Yeah, I think, as I said, it's a bit hard with the club IP when you're in clubland, but I think as much as you can, just trying to get your name out there and be creating something different. You know, it doesn't have to be the photos that you're capturing or the exact video that you're capturing for someone else's platform, but staying active and, you know, showing that point of difference. I'm not great at it. I try to be. I try to think I am, but I'm not. But, you know, there's creators.
You're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Thank you. But there's creators over in the States, which I've kind of taken a leaf out of their book. There's a photographer in the NBA and a photographer in it's MLB, the baseball over there.
Yeah.
They do it really well, and they just kind of do more of a day in the lifestyle stuff. They do get ready with me's. They do kind of like their perspective. So I've tried to take, you know, bits and pieces out of that, and, you know, it's not essentially the content I'm creating for someone else or what someone else is paying me to do, but utilizing the opportunities that I have and kind of what else can I show there. So even when I was down at the Australian Open, I just did like a get ready with me, like come to the AO with me, that kind of stuff, which is just a point of difference. But, you know, being in this creative space and being in this industry, not many people get this opportunity. So to be able to showcase that, you know, we are so lucky to be in this industry, and what are the cool things that we get to do? Like anyone would love to see that kind of stuff. So I just say keep doing it, go for it, and create something different, show what you're doing as much as you can.
Yeah, I love that.
Use your foundations and skill set that you've got to create for other people to also create for yourself. But you know, obviously that takes time, and you know, we're all time poor. But look, we've speaking of time poor, we've probably run a bit far over time, but it's been an amazing chat, Gab. Like, thanks so much for joining us. Before you go though, what's next for you? What have you got on the horizon, if you're allowed to share? And if not, what's like a goal for you? I think I saw on your Instagram stories long ago, someone asked you like, what do you want to create for? What would be like your ultimate pinnacle thing? I think you mentioned something about creating for an Olympic sport or going to the Olympics. So is that your kind of pinnacle?
Yeah, I think I've been asked that question a couple of times since leaving, and I think the Olympics would be something that would just be so cool to be a part of. Yeah. I've heard it's very difficult to get in there, but once you're in, which I think is like a lot of this stuff within this industry. Yeah. I think just keep, you know, being exposed to different sports. Got a few cool conversations happening, which I don't really want to say much about yet. You'll see it soon. But yeah, there's a cool few things in the pipeline, which I'm really excited about. And yeah, just keep experiencing different sports, meeting new people, and staying connected within the industry. I think that's the number one thing when you are now out freelancing, is just making sure that, you know, your name's still out there, you're still in constant communication with all the people that, you know, you've been dealing with for the last 10 years. So yeah, staying connected for sure.
Nice.
Amazing.
And if people want to get in touch with you about some work or follow your content, where can they find you?
It's just Gaby Barns Creative on Instagram. That's me pretty much. Try to be as active as I can. Nice. So yeah, you can see all of my work there, which, yeah.
Lovely.
Amazing. Well, Gab, we've really appreciated you being on. We love your work. We've obviously been fans of yours for a really long time. Reese, who's not here today, obviously was super upset that he couldn't be here to have the chat, but obviously...
You got me instead.
You guys,
it's great.
You guys are well connected, and yeah, I guess... we appreciate the professionalism that you have in the industry. We appreciate you advocating for creatives. We appreciate you just doing all the cool things that you do. Keep it up. We can't wait to follow your journey, and then hopefully we can get you back next time and hear about all these new amazing endeavours. So thanks so much for joining.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Cheers.